Hello, I'm Father Joe Roesch of the Marian Fathers of the Immaculate Conception. Thank you for joining us as we continue with our year-long journey reading the diary of St. Maria Faustina Kowalska from beginning to end. Today we take up from where we left off, beginning with diary entry number 188. During the last days of the Carnival, when I was making a holy hour, I saw how the Lord Jesus suffered as he was being scourged. Oh, such an inconceivable agony! How terribly Jesus suffered during the scourging. O poor sinners, on the day of judgment, how will you face the Jesus whom you are now torturing so cruelly? His blood flowed to the ground, and in some places his flesh started to fall off. I saw a few bare bones on his back. The meek Jesus moaned softly and sighed. On one occasion, Jesus gave me to know how pleasing to him is the soul that faithfully keeps the rule. A soul will receive a greater reward for observing the rule than for penances and great mortifications. The latter will be rewarded also if they are undertaken over and above the rule, but they will not surpass the rule. Once during an adoration, the Lord demanded that I give myself up to him as an offering, by bearing a certain suffering in atonement, not only for the sins of the world in general, but specifically for transgressions committed in this house. Immediately I said, "Very good, I am ready." But Jesus gave me to see what I was going to suffer, and in one moment the whole passion unfolded itself before my eyes. Firstly, my intentions will not be recognized. There will be all kinds of suspicion and distrust, as well as various kinds of humiliations and adversities. I will not mention everything here. All these things stood before my soul's eye like a dark storm from which lightning was ready to strike at any moment, waiting only for my consent. For a moment my nature was frightened. Then suddenly the dinner bell rang. I left the chapel, trembling and undecided, but the sacrifice was ever present before me, for I had neither decided to accept it, nor had I refused the Lord. I wanted to place myself completely in his will. If the Lord Jesus himself were to impose it on me, I was ready. But Jesus gave me to know that I myself was to give my free consent and accept it with full consciousness, or else it would be meaningless. Its whole power was contained in my free act before God. But at the same time, Jesus gave me to understand that the decision was completely within my power. I could do it or not do it. And so I then answered immediately, "Jesus, I accept everything that you wish to send me. I trust in your goodness." At that moment, I felt that by this act I glorified God greatly. But I armed myself with patience. As soon as I left the chapel, I had an encounter with reality. I do not want to describe the details, but there was as much of it as I was able to bear. I would not have been able to bear even one drop more. One morning I heard these words in my soul: "Go to Mother General, Michael, and tell her that this thing displeases me in such and such a house." I cannot mention what the thing was, nor the house in question, but I did tell it to Mother General, although it cost me very much. Once I took upon myself a terrible temptation which one of our students in the house at Warsaw was going through. It was the temptation of suicide. For 7 days I suffered, and after the 7 days Jesus granted her the grace which was being asked, and then my suffering also ceased. It was a great suffering. I often take upon myself the torments of our students. Jesus permits me to do this, and so do my confessors. My heart is a permanent dwelling place for Jesus. No one but Jesus has access to it. It is from Jesus that I derive strength to fight difficulties and oppositions. I want to be transformed into Jesus in order to be able to give myself completely to souls. Without Jesus, I would not get near to souls, because I know what I am of myself. I absorb God into myself in order to give him to souls. Here, St. Faustina speaks of the carnival. This is probably the time immediately before Ash Wednesday and the beginning of Lent. Unfortunately, it is a time when many people commit many sins as a sort of last fling before Lent. In this context, St. Faustina speaks of how much Jesus suffered during his scourging for the sake of sinners. She warns sinners of the consequences of their actions on the day of judgment. Jesus told St. Faustina how pleased he was when someone keeps the rule of a religious community. We should all seek to do what is expected of us, to keep the faith, to be faithful to our marriage vows, to get to Mass, etc. Fulfilling our daily duties is one of the keys to holiness, and it is very pleasing to God. Then St. Faustina speaks of her vocation as a victim soul, suffering on behalf of others as Jesus did. And Jesus asks St. Faustina to consent to all that she would have to endure. He respects our free will, and the sufferings have more merit if they are accepted freely rather than imposed. So she says yes to the Lord, and she had some very real and difficult crosses to bear. Finally, St. Faustina writes of her heart as a permanent dwelling place for Jesus. She wants to be transformed into Jesus and to absorb God into her heart so that she can give his love to others and to give him to souls. We can learn from this. We too want Jesus to dwell in our heart, because of our own accord we can do little, but with the help of Jesus and with his power and strength, all things are possible.